When you put women on a pedestal, at the same time, you're really removing them from the sphere of serious intellectual and political discourse. And there are many examples of this from my personal life, from current political theater. It is bizarre to me that people continue to refer to Ivanka Trump, the daughter of President Donald Trump, as if she were a child, as if she were a teenager. She's basically the same age I am. She is 35 years old. Many people are shocked when you mention this. I mentioned this today to my Chinese teacher. We talk about politics and stuff in class. Like, people talk about her like she's a teenage model. And she's not. She's a married woman who is 35 years old, who has had an elite education, who has had a string of jobs on paper that look very impressive on paper. I don't really know that much about her career. Obviously, some of that stuff may be exaggerated on her resume. But with that having been noted, this is a 35-year-old woman who has been engaged in American business dealings at an elite level and is now engaged in American politics at an elite level and in international politics at an elite level. So how are we going to talk about her? The extent to which she is infantilized. She is discussed as if she were an infant, as if she were a child in the mainstream media, is so broad, is so deep, is so universal that people are often shocked. We say, she's a 35-year-old woman. Now, what was it that brought this to mind? I have a video on this channel where I mentioned it was just a strange thing. At one point, Donald Trump said of his daughter, Ivanka, that she was a big fan of 50 Cent and G-Unit, the rapper 50 Cent. And it made me stop and think, how old is Ivanka? And I looked it up. Probably when 50 Cent was at the peak of his fame, that probably would have been when Ivanka was in her first year of university, or possibly her last year of high school. And Donald Trump making that comment that his own daughter was a big fan of this rapper, 50 Cent, quite likely true. I mean, whether or not, anyway, I don't know how closely he paid attention to his daughter's taste in music, but she certainly is the right generation of people where that would have been the song playing in the hallway and playing at the school dance party or whatever in her last year of high school, her first year of university, approximately that time. It is no doubt true that many people in this world are psychologically scarred by being told again and again that they're ugly, that they're worthless, that they're not smart enough. But there's a flip side of that, which is that many, many people are, in a sense, really psychologically damaged and really have their intellectual development impaired because people are always telling them that they're beautiful, that they're good enough, that they're smart enough, that they're wonderful, when they're not. That they deal with, if you like, a cushion of flattery, separating themselves from the hard edges of reality. And I have known women like this myself, face to face. And we have a tremendous problem in our culture with actually criticizing women the same way we would criticize a man. If you're going to criticize the political views and the economic views of Ivanka Trump, do not do her the disservice of patronizing her and treating her as a cute teenage female. She's a 35-year-old woman. Criticize her the same way you would criticize a 35-year-old man, but I would say, and this is the topic of this video, the same way you would criticize a 25-year-old man or even a 65-year-old man. If we are adults talking about politics, I think there is a level of seriousness and a level of severity and even a level of silliness that everyone is ought to be allotted equally. They ought to be treated with equal seriousness, equal rigor, yes, also equal silliness. Satire is also part of politics and so on. Let's not kid ourselves. As a culture, modern Western culture, we have a huge problem with trivializing the voices of women at the same time that we put them on a pedestal, right? Now, of course, we're we're trivializing the seriousness of their opinions, their understanding, their perspective in the world, and what we're putting on a pedestal most of the time is just their physical beauty. There are some exceptions. Probably some female athletes are put on a pedestal for other reasons, not just their beauty, etc., etc. Okay? So, I got some responses here to my critique of Wengie. And I don't think any of y'all Googled Wengie before writing these frankly idiotic comments. Now, I've said many times, I cannot waste my time responding to the stupidest 90% of my audience. But in this case, I think these comments illustrate this broader, deeper problem of how we address ourselves to women of any age, but especially women who are perceived as young. And again, Ivanka Trump perceived as young at age 35. Right? So, first comment, none of these are from trolls. These are all people who've watched my channel for quite some time. They're not trolls. They're concerned citizens. So I have one comment here I read, quote, as a self-proclaimed vegan activist, I fail to understand how this type of video can help the vegan cause in any way. Nevertheless, I appreciate the entertainment aspect, although I do find you condescending in this video. Let's think about the word condescending. I continue the quote. Quote, have you ever thought that Wengie has perhaps not reached intellectual maturity in order to understand what intellectual integrity means? Question mark. You are a teacher. Why don't you teach her instead of laughing at her? Okay, close quote. I'm not Wengie's teacher. Wengie is not a child. Wengie is an adult woman. The only references I have seen to Wengie's age on the internet indicate that she is over 30 years old. If you find that surprising, go to YouTube right now. Or you know what? Follow the link. I'll give you a link below the video. But you can go to YouTube and simply search for Wengie plastic surgery. That alone will probably convince you that she's over 30 years old. If I'm wrong, how young do you think she is? Again, you look at that plastic surgery video. She has had many surgeries. You can even see them just scrolling down to her YouTube channel. You can see some changes in her face looking at earlier videos. What's her minimum age here? 25? I think nobody believes she's under 25. Again, look at the plastic surgery video. I do find it believable. The different references have found to her being over 30 or perhaps exactly 30 years old. But if she were 25, this would still be a bullshit comment, okay? Quote, have you ever thought that Wengie has not reached the intellectual level of maturity to understand what intellectual integrity means? No, I don't think that because I'm not a sexist piece of shit, okay? You say that my video is condescending. No. Talking to women as if they're infants, as if their opinions don't matter, as if their opinions are not to be taken equally as seriously as a man's, that is being condescending. What I'm doing is the opposite of being condescending. I criticize Wengie exactly the same way I criticize Durian Rider. You can see that in the same video. You could go back and make contrast to my videos in Durian Rider. Some people, only a couple of people ever, have said to me that they thought I criticized women more harshly than men on my channel. And just in conversations like this, like in the comment section or whatever, email, I asked them, well, have you actually seen my videos criticizing men? And I give them links to examples. I've criticized men in terms of politics, in terms of Buddhism, Buddhist philosophy, under a number of headings. But of course, in connection to veganism and animal rights, I have very harsh, incisive, trenchant criticisms of men. Now, I would feel like garbage if I was going easy on the women. If I was saying, oh, well, she's female, therefore I'm not going to really point out what she's doing wrong. That would be condescending. That would be, and again, sexism, it's not really the right term because sexism suggests an ideology. That would be, allowing a sexist worldview to really warp and hamper and impair your engagement with politics, which is ultimately what this is about for me. For me, this is not really about diet advice. Diet advice is worth talking about also, okay? Now, as it happens, Wengie is a 30-year-old woman, so far as I know. If I'm wrong, if someone told me she's actually 28, I would believe it. I do not think she can be much younger than 30. Take a look at the video on her plastic surgery. it is very believable that she's over 30. I don't think that matters. I think this person making the comment, who is a female or is apparently female, on the internet, anyone can do it, but this is apparently a female. I think on a really deep level, you perceive someone as a young woman, which really means a youthful woman. Because again, Ivanka Trump is perceived as young or youthful at age 35. And I understand why. I mean, how she doesn't dress like an old woman. I understand there's a sense in which Ivanka Trump, who also has plastic surgery, she may create an illusion that she's more youthful than she is, but she is a fully adult woman, okay? Now, I don't know where you put the cutoff, but for me, anyone over 23, I talk to as an adult, period. Man or woman, if you've reached 23, I will talk to you the same way I talk to someone who's 65 or 55. We're all equal over 23. That's where I put the cutoff. I have a lot of experience on university campuses talking to people who are between 17 and 23, so I guess it's 17 to 22, where I'm not talking to them with the same level of honesty, but I am still trying to help them, where you're a little bit more restrained, a little bit more polite, but for me, not flattering. And there can be a lot of different, like talking about meat eating, talking about what goes on in a slaughterhouse. I actually do not put a guilt trip on an 18-year-old the same way I would on a 23-year-old. I do not want to emotionally upset someone who's that young or challenge them to that extent. However, I remember I was talking to one young man, and he was speaking in very coded language, even though he knew I was Jewish. I'm Jewish by blood. But I remember I was talking to a young man, and it was obvious that he was a bit of a neo-Nazi or neo-Nazi sympathizer. Now, I did try to... We were having a conversation, actually, about political events immediately after World War II. And this kid was not dumb, but it was... And, okay, so you have a conversation where it's like, I'm not going to try to discuss politics with this kid the same way I would a 50-year-old man, because whatever, let's say he was 19. I don't really know his age. But on the other hand, I'm not going to be patronizing. I'm not going to be condescending. I'm not going to flatter him. I'm not going to say, oh, good for you. I'm so glad you're reading history. I'm so glad you're interested in the history of Western Europe. No, kid, I'm fucking terrified for you. I think you're turning into a fucking neo-Nazi. I think step by step you're reading a bunch of biased and misleading literature that's going to take you down a path that's dangerous to yourself and others and is fundamentally factually wrong. Okay, same shit with diet advice. Really, it is. I think people start reading biased information about health and science and nutrition, and step by step, that takes them down a path that is dangerous to themselves and others. It's very true of fad diets. It's very true of religion. And again, I've had to talk to people who were Buddhists, who believed in Buddhism in a supernatural sense, and some of them were 18 and some of them were 58. I've had a lot of these kinds of careful conversations with people where you're really trying to educate someone and maybe take them away from a supernatural worldview and put them back in touch with reality. I've had a lot of difficult conversations with people like this in my life. In some sense, I think those are the skills I bring to YouTube, by the way. I think that's why I'm as good as I am at talking to you guys right now on YouTube. If I'm not good enough for you, go watch Durian Rider instead. See if I give a fuck. But some people appreciate, this form of reasoning that I bring to YouTube. Okay? So no, the actual question to restate was, have you thought that Wengie has not reached intellectual maturity in order to understand these? No. Even if she hasn't, even if she's a 30-year-old woman who hasn't, the whole point is I am going to treat her with the dignity to take her worldview seriously, to criticize and excoriate it seriously, as I would for a man. And you have to stop perceiving women this way, right? You may not put the cutoff at 23. You may put the cutoff at 18 or 26. I don't know. You have to decide. Like, I came to that number 23, honestly, within the last 5 years, because I spent so much time on university campuses. I thought, you know what? At age 23, people are as mature as they're going to get. Getting older is not getting wiser. You can meet people who are 60 years old, are still a goddamn fool. Really. I've really, just based on empirical experience, so you know what, 23? That's it. You got. I treat people as fully grown adults. So look, I got a couple more comments here I'm going to read. I said earlier, it is true, and we have a lot of folks in the society, being told that you're ugly can have a really negative impact on you, growing up or in your adult life. But being told that you're beautiful all the time can also have a negative impact on you. One of my girlfriends, I haven't had that many, so some of these stories overlap, but I had a blonde Canadian girlfriend. She was both cute and sexy. It's a rare combination. She had many other redeeming qualities. But, in terms of her face, like some women have a face that people find austere or imposing or challenging. She had a face that looked cute in the sense of being non-threatening. She's also beautiful, but I'm just saying this is a specific type of face. Now, most of us, when we're 8 years old, can walk down the street and smile at people, smile at complete strangers, and make eye contact with them. And maybe at 8 years old, you expect them to smile back. But she got to age 30. She went through her whole life behaving in this basically childish way on the streets of Toronto. So I guess I'm thinking of her at about age 26. I forget exactly. And she would actually get disappointed and angry if complete strangers didn't smile back at her. Right? And I said a very simple thing to her because we were walking through Chinatown together. And she did this to a Chinese woman who was a middle-aged, let's say it was a 55-year-old Chinese woman on the street. And then my girlfriend complained to me that this Chinese woman didn't reciprocate her making eye contact in this way. Chinese woman was probably having a bad day or whatever, but the Chinese woman kind of looked at her and scowled and then looked down at the street and shuffled past her. Okay? I said to my girlfriend straight up, do you think you would expect this kind of behavior to be rewarded if you were a tall, thin, black male? The level of seriousness expected of you and the way your behavior is evaluated by being a tall, thin man, and is in Canada, in Toronto, or in many parts of the United States, being a tall, thin black man, an African American, a man of African descent, is totally different, even for something as tiny as eye contact. But my girlfriend at that time, she was so used to the whole world telling her that she was beautiful and wonderful and pandering to her and treating her like an infant and rewarding infantile behavior well into her 20s. I'm sure now it still continues in the 30s. This was devastating for her. I didn't say it in a mean way. I just said, have you consider, what reaction would you expect from this stranger on the street if you were a tall, thin black male instead of a short, sexy, cute white woman? Because again, even some women, there's some women who have more of a tall, statuesque look that's a little bit more threatening, and not quite the same behavior gets accepted from them, I think. They're regarded as more imposing or what have you. And I may have mentioned this on the internet at some point. That same girlfriend, she told me proudly about one time when she had an assignment, like an essay assignment for one of her classes. I forget, probably an art history class or something, and there were these very specific guidelines for the assignment. She decided to throw away all the guidelines, and instead of doing a normal essay, it was supposed to be printed out out of a computer with, certain page specifications, she got out her colored pens and pencils, and she bought a big poster-sized piece of paper, and she drew pretty pictures around the border, and she did the essay handwritten, including the bibliography on one big, I forget if it was pink, but it was some kind of construction paper. And she handed it into the professor, smiling, and she got she got an A-. She wasn't penalized for doing this, for handing in a handwritten essay that way. And I said to her again, do you think I would have gotten away with that shit? Do you think the professor would have and the professor didn't even ask her. There was no meeting. There was no question. There was no question of marks being docked. And I really think this is just not taking women seriously. So whatever, when she did that, she was probably 22 years old. She worked for a few years. She actually took a few years off between high school and university. So she could have been even older. She could have been 23 or something, I don't know. There's a sense in which her education doesn't matter. Her living up to the same standards as the other students doesn't matter. Just because she's a cute female. She's perceived as a young or youthful female. It's actually a huge problem in our society. And again, she was very uncomfortable with that. And I just asked her again with the other terms. Do you think a tall, thin, black man in your same class, if he handed in that same thing, what do you think the professor's reaction would be? Do you think they would waive the requirements for the assignment and just accept this? It's like a primary school fucking craft project instead of a proper academic essay. Why? And what is the problem with that? So that girlfriend, by the way, she identified as a feminist. It's a problem, and it cuts deep. And so there's one more story I want to tell you. I'm going to get on with this, but All right, I'll push on. I'm going to read the next comment here. Comment again from a female viewer, not a troll. Female viewer who identifies as female at any rate, because on the internet you don't know who anyone really is. A lot of your stuff is interesting, she says, but it's really irritating how you keep resorting to ad hominem attacks. The part of the video that actually got substance is you addressing her false claims, but you hysterically laughing at a 20-something-year-old girl's mannerisms in some kind of attempt to undermine her credibility just feels really petty. I get that YouTubers are false and overly fake, but why not just make a passing comment about this rather than trying to mock them? Okay? So, again, 20-something-year-old girl. So this person doesn't, I mean, it's not possible that she's a teenager. You can look at the, plastic surgery video. But if she were in her 20s, to my knowledge, she's in her 30s. But if she were an adult woman in her 20s, so this is a woman who got some kind of university degree in marketing and who has had a career in corporate marketing. And if we're keeping it all the way real, it shows. If you look at her YouTube channel, it seems like the YouTube channel of an adult woman who had a career in marketing. Especially if you compare what her videos were like a year ago now, okay? You are asking me to pander to her, to not treat her like a fucking human being because she's a 20-something female. 20-something is adult. Read the history of the fucking Western world. People in their 20s are old enough to join the army. People in their 20s are members of parliament, still today, but much more in medieval history. In your 20s, you are mentally and intellectually an adult, and how long are you going to infantilize people? Why would you treat anyone, man or woman, as an infant, as mentally incompetent in their 20s? In this case, she's not even in her 20s. But her minimum age here has got to be 25. This is sick, and it's a sickness that's more powerful because it's invisible to these people. This is something that's a distorting, myopic view of the world. No, if she was if she was 25, I don't regret anything I've said. Now, again, you can compare this to other forms of mockery and criticism I've engaged in. I repeatedly, we just had a comment confirming. Apparently her current age is 30 precisely. So the comments I've seen that she's exactly 30 and that she's in her 30s, those are both accurate. But apparently she did turn 30 some number of months ago. So she's 30 years old. But I gotta say, this is really sick. Now, look, when I criticize, when I laugh at, when I scorn Durian Rider for sitting on the floor of his kitchen and having freaking out and ranting at the camera, when I criticize his mannerisms as well as his content, which I think is worthwhile and important to do, in as much as veganism is a political movement, blah, blah, blah. Why would his age or gender be a factor? Think about what the course of action is you're recommending here. I mean, I have so many videos excoriating, seriously, harshly criticizing and excoriating male intellectuals, male leaders, some of them under the heading of atheism, under the heading of Buddhism, vegan politics, etc., etc. The fact that she's 30 years old shouldn't change things. The fact that she's a woman shouldn't change things. If you're a person with any intellectual integrity, you're quite right to treat others in this way and demand that they also conduct themselves with intellectual integrity, which is what she failed to do. And then there's another reply from another female commenter, or apparently female commenter, who says, agreed, à-bas-le-ciel makes some awesome vlogs, but in this case, I think he needs to pick on someone his own size. Close quote. Think about how condescending that is. Think about how insulting that is. Really, that comment is more insulting to Wengie than anything I said. You think I need to pick on someone who says, Wengie is more successful than I'll ever be. She's more successful than me financially, in terms of her career. Say she already had a successful career in marketing. It shows. She's more successful on YouTube. So far as I know, I think she's probably had a better education than I have too. Wengie's got a lot going for her. And that, for me, also raises the question, like, if you don't think Wengie's an idiot, and again, you look at some of her earlier videos, she's not always acting like such an idiot. To what extent is she being intentionally misleading and insincere? So I'll tell you something else about Wengie. She read a book that she said changed her life, and it's a book many of you will know very well. She read a book called How Not to Die by Dr. Greger. And she said it totally changed her understanding of health and nutrition and changed the way she eats and the advice she gives on the internet. So this is an adult woman, 30 years old, who read Dr. Greger's favorite book and changed her life accordingly. Now, already, what do you mean pick on someone your own size? This is someone, so Wengie is entitled not just to have her own opinions about health and nutrition, she's entitled to have her own opinion on veganism. If some of you don't know, Dr. Greger is probably the world's most famous and effective vegan propaganda artist. He is a legitimate medical doctor who uses legitimate medical science to publish vegan propaganda. Okay, I'm not saying that all his stuff is full of lies. Some of his stuff is good, some of it is not so good, but he is not a doctor who merely insinuates that you ought to reduce the amount of meat you're eating or you ought to vaguely have a healthier diet. Dr. Greger is 100% insistent and persistent in saying basically everyone ought to go vegan. And he argues that primarily in terms of health outcomes, not in terms of animal rights or ethics, but in terms of the dramatic effect a vegan diet can have on your likelihood to have a variety of cancers, heart disease, etc. Okay? So Wengie read that book, and she has videos responding to and giving her advice based on her statement that Dr. Greger's book changed her life and transformed her understanding of modern health science and diet. And she's making this video that's not telling you to go vegan. I mean, again, even if that is the only book she has ever read in her life on nutritional science, that actually gives you a pretty high level of knowledge, really specifically salient to what we talk about here on à-bas-le-ciel Broadcasting Corporation. And she's not recommending you go vegan. She's not even recommending you do push-ups. She's recommending this horse shit like drink cold water. And the cold water can burn 30% more calories per day. Already discussed at length. All right? Now, what if she was a 20-something-year-old girl, as you say? Again, 20-something-year-old woman. If she was 25, and this is all you know about her, she read Dr. Greger's book, she's making health... On a level I think these people haven't examined. They are treating women as infants. They are just not taking them seriously. I take Freely just as seriously as I take Durian Rider. In some ways, I think I take Freely more seriously, because Durian Rider is pretty fucking hard to take seriously for reasons that have nothing to do with his gender. All right? And so one more comment. And again, this guy is not a troll. He's a longtime viewer. There's a comment. Sorry, I assume this is male. In this case, actually, there's no indication. Could be male or female. There must be a way to call out stupid bullshit without making yourself look creepy or immature. The way you laughed at this ditzy girl was cringy. Okay, because that video closes with like 2 minutes of me laughing at how ridiculous Wengie's video is. Okay? So, look, I just say, why is it creepy or immature for me, a 38-year-old man, to criticize a 30-year-old woman? She may be a 30-year-old woman who behaves like a teenager, but that in itself is actually a very good reason to criticize her, right? Why is it immature for me to criticize her? I mean... Again, I have absolutely no doubt in my heart that what I said in that video, you guys know the video covered a range of topics. It included, me expressing interest and concern over some of the things Durian Rider did, the general question of honesty on the internet, the general contrast between telling the truth, telling a lie, and taking this sort of position in between where you're saying things that are, in a sense, technically kind of sort of true and yet misleading. There's a lot there. But No, I mean, so there's two words here using this complaint. One is creepy and one is immature. Why would it be immature and why would it be creepy? Really worth questioning. Really worth questioning. For a 38-year-old man to criticize the ludicrous health and diet advice from a 30-year-old woman. And again, in this case, interestingly, a 30-year-old woman who read Dr. Greger's book and who claimed that it dramatically transformed her life, her attitude towards diet, health, and fitness, etc. On another matter, I had a complaint come in. And I just say this with all due sympathy, because a lot of these people are... so someone made the comment. It's a totally good comment. Someone made the comment just now. Some people think it's cringy to laugh at your own jokes. I wasn't laughing at my own jokes. I was laughing at how terrible her video was. So this is a case in which I was not laughing at my own jokes. I was laughing at, it was quite obvious what I was laughing at. I was laughing at her. Again, a 30-year-old woman who has had a lot of plastic surgery and who pretends to be a ditzy teenager on camera, but we all know that she isn't. Look, I got a comment from someone else who, again, is not a troll, who said to me, look, some of these videos you do are upsetting. You should think about how this person's family would feel if they watched it. Now, that is kind of an interesting point. It's interesting, but it's wrong. You absolutely cannot censor yourself when talking about politics as if your video were addressed to the mother and grandfather of the person you're criticizing. That's impossible. As a standard, there's absolutely no way you can do it. Now, I can also say, in this case, sometimes you make a criticism of somebody and it really is intended for the person you criticize. Just today, Happy Healthy Vegan had a criticism of Durian Rider up, and in many ways, Happy Healthy Vegan was not talking to the crowd. They were talking directly to Durian Rider. They were really trying to get the criticism across to him to change his behavior. So sometimes that's the case. But most of the time, we're neither doing this for the friends and family of the person we're criticizing. We can't possibly censor ourselves to the extent of trying to make Wengie's mom happy if Wengie's mom sees my video. We can't do that. But we also have to recognize that we are doing this for our audience. In my case, I have, no second thoughts about it. When I'm making these videos, I'm doing it for the movement. The movement isn't me, and it isn't you, and it isn't her, and it isn't her parents. It isn't any one person or attitude. And in many ways, the movement is something that doesn't exist yet. Something that's unknowable. Something that remains unknown because it's still forming out of this mess of eccentrics on the internet and people holding placards in the street. The vegan movement I think of as something yet to exist. Something we can't fully define or can't fully understand or can't fully criticize because it's not even real yet. It's an idea and a dream and an aspiration that we share. But if you were to actually ask me, why do I bother to criticize Wengie? Or why do I bother to film myself laughing at how terrible her video is and share it with you guys? Believe it or not, it's not for Wengie. It's not for Wengie's mom. It's not for fame. It's not for money. It's not for the views. It may be hard for some of y'all to believe if you're new to this channel. But truth be told, I am doing it for the movement.